ESG-scented Palm Pilot. It's the ESG industry's only weekly woke data podcast featuring analyst Matt Mascardi.
Palm Pilot, how old are you?
Well, we're covering some old things. I'm covering a 2009 proxy contest, Bill Ackman versus Target. I just felt like going old school.
Really, nothing says relevant like doing something from 20 years
I
ago.
just feel like finding new ways to crap on Bill Ackman. In today's ESG-flavored contested proxy called January 10th, 2024, a bit more Bill Ackman bashing and the board that just keeps on giving charcoal to kids at Christmas.
Wow.
Boeing.
I like
What's your
that.
favorite board, Boeing?
Yeah, well, I will say I'm making fun of you for how old you're going here,
I
but
don't care. You can make fun of me.
the fact is I'm going back to 1999 with the
That's true,
Boeing
too.
board, so it's not exactly like we're both living in the 90s.
Our show today is being sponsored by Free Flow Analytics, the only ESG data platform to measure real board influence
Yes.
and diversity power.
That's right. And while let me let the crowd cheer this one out while I turn up
I want to make a warning to the crowd today that because Matt has important meetings this afternoon, I had to edit the time that I normally edit, which means that there's a lot in here. So brace yourself. So if you're not a hater of Bill Ackman or Boeing, maybe this is not the show for you, but you should still listen.
This is always the show for you.
I'm going to get right into it.
Yeah,
We have a lot.
let's not do a thing. Ready? So there's only two segments, and they're both
Two long
7-hour long segments.
It's good research, though.
Let's
First
do
of all,
this
let's talk
thing.
about dumb old Pershing Square Capital Management. Bill Ackman wrote that his New York-based firm has built a reputation as a constructive, long-term, and helpful owner.
Wait.
Okay, liar. Pershing is actually incorporated in the bailiwick of Guernsey,
Yes, that's correct.
a tax haven, a
Yeah.
place where Pershing Square faces a corporate tax rate of 0%, a place that does not levy capital gains taxes, which means that the rich stay rich and don't have to accidentally fund something completely obnoxious like a playground.
What
or,
about DEI?
Or a DEI
a
program.
DEI,
Exactly.
yeah, a DEI.
By the way, Guernsey also prioritizes corporate privacy. The Tax Justice Network ranks it as the 10th most secretive country in the world, which I guess is great for Bill Ackman because while he is super busy getting into other people's business and careers, it means that despite Pershing being traded on the FTSE 100, he does not have to disclose how much money he actually makes.
Ooh.
So Bill is the scrutinizer always and never the scrutinizee?
The scrutinized.
The
No,
scrutinized?
you're not a scrutinized. It's not like an employee. It's a.
I should ask Ari, the data queen, because she's really good at that New York Times spelling bee game. Second of all, let's talk about Bill Ackman's shameless editing program.
Ooh.
Pershing Square regularly publishes an ESG statement on its website. In March
do.
2023, there was a diversity and inclusion paragraph in the main body, and then an Exhibit C called Diversity and Inclusion Guidelines.
I love a good guideline.
After Bill viciously targeted 3 female college presidents, especially black woman Claudine Gay at Harvard, he shamelessly changed the names of these sections to Diversity and Culture
Oh.
and Diversity and Culture Guidelines. That's right. You heard that right. The dude is so petty and openly anti-black that he explicitly replaced the word inclusion with culture. Why? Because inclusion is part of his new favorite enemy, DEI.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Or what? Why is inclusion the bad thing?
Here's why. Because inclusion implies the actual act of hiring someone, of including someone, does it not?
I think
Culture
it
implies nothing.
No, so I think the diversity part is the hiring of somebody. I think the
No.
inclusion part is giving them power to
Okay.
do a thing. That's what
However
I
you
would
want to
say.
parse
That's
this.
what I would say.
However you want to parse this, from March to December, after he fought Claudine Gay, he needed to get in there and edit this document. We have the Wayback Machine, thank you, on the internet has the March 23 document. So he needed to go in there. Here's what else he needed to do, Matt. He needed to delete 5 initiatives that were previously part of Pershing Square's effort to advance its commitment to diversity. Here's what he deleted specifically: identify D&I best practices supported by research, improve the level of diversity within the firm's leadership positions and committees.
Yeah, I saw that.
He changed it from improve the level of diversity to now foster diversity. So he doesn't actually want to hire more. He just wants to
Foster.
I don't know. But he
Sound
again,
like
he
incubating
needed to change this
diversity?
language. He eliminated identify opportunities for the firm to engage with its broader communities to promote equity, social justice, and inclusion. Right? Can't have that. He eliminated recognized diversity as a business objective when evaluating firm partnerships. And finally, he eliminated provide regular diversity and inclusion training to all employees. So all of this because he got mad at the president of Harvard.
But do you think he knew that this was all in the document? Do you think that, like, this is one of those things where, like, he's shooting from the hip on Twitter? He doesn't really care about, like, whatever stupid employee policies exist at his firm because it doesn't really matter to him. Like, he's
so
the
you're saying
owner.
maybe he didn't know in the first place, and then when he saw them, he deleted
I'm
them?
saying he didn't. He probably didn't pay close enough attention in the first place to the fact that any of that was in there. And then,
But why is any of it bad?
He
Why-
goes
why
on
isn't he
Twitter
eliminated?
and he basically says, and he says, this is a near quote. He says that DEI is the root cause of anti-Semitism.
Right.
Doesn't he say that?
At Harvard.
At Harvard,
Yeah.
right? So it's the root cause of anti-Semitism. Then someone who works at Pershing goes, oh, fuck. We wrote all that
Yeah.
stuff with the E in it. Now we're going
No,
to have to get rid of...
with the I.
Is it the I?
The I he hates. Inclusion.
There's an I in there. We got to go back. We got to adjust the document to our new policy, which is whatever Bill Ackman says on Twitter today. It's basically like having Trump as president again.
Yes, because and all of this because he's angry at one black woman. Because you don't need to change this whole thing
no.
because of her.
Was it her? Because he wanted to make a donation to Harvard. The New York Times reported that he wanted to make some donation to Harvard, and they fucked it up.
Right.
And it wasn't necessary. I don't think it was under her tenure. I think it was under the prior president's tenure.
But the claim was that she was only there because of its DEI
And then she gets the job
Right.
because she's just a black woman. She's not that qualified, except that she's exceptionally
And
qualified.
despite the fact that he doesn't tell us what it is to be or not to be qualified for anything, he also did this. He also made a point for the first time to define diversity. So he said by diversity,
Ooh.
we mean diversity of all kinds, including diversity of personal experience, of socioeconomic status, of one's background, political views, of race, blah, 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 blah. So suddenly now race is suddenly devalued. It's behind things like personal experience and political views, and gender is not even a part of diversity. He has eliminated gender as a part of diversity at Pershing Square.
Look, is it really diversity? 50% of the population has a gender.
And I only say this because I'm saying it's not a coincidence to target 3 female presidents.
I know
at university.
It does seem like fairly oddly coincidental that it's only female presidents getting targeted.
And in case you're interested, here's what it takes to sit on a Bill Ackman board if you're a person of color. Spoiler alert, it takes a lot.
Ooh, yes.
This is Tope Lawani. He is a director at Pershing Square. And I'm going to go quickly over this because this is just an incredible list of qualifications. But
Hold on a second.
I wanted to include it all because he is by far one of the most qualified people for anything anywhere, including at Pershing Square. And I wanted to just tell you what it takes to be a black hire and to not be part of a DEI program, but just to be qualified. Again, Bill Ackman never tells us what it means to be qualified, but
all I am is excited that we have elevator music on the back.
Okay, here we go.
Go through this.
Here we go. Tope Lawani. I'm already tired thinking about it. Co-founder and managing partner of Helios Investment Partners, co-CEO and director of Helios Fairfax Partners, principal in the San Francisco and London offices of TPG Capital, mergers and acquisitions and corporate development analyst at the Walt Disney Company, director of Helios Towers and NBA Africa, a member of the Harvard Law School Dean's Advisory Board and an international board of the End Fund, previously director of several public companies, Vivo Energy, Equity Group Holdings, First City Monument Bank, Millicom International Cellular, a member of the MIT Corporation, which is MIT's board of trustees, served as a board observer of the board of directors of J. Crew, Burger King. He's on the MIT School of Engineering Dean's Advisory Council, the Overseas Visiting Committee of the Harvard Business School, the MIT Open Courseware Advisory Board, and the board of directors of the Emerging Markets Private Equity. He also has a BS in Chemical Engineering from MIT with a minor in economics and a JD from Harvard Law School and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Not to mention that he's fluent in Yoruba. So this is everything it takes to be a qualified black man.
I would like to say
in Bill Ackman's world.
But there's an important part of this
go ahead.
that gets glossed over because in the documentation from Pershing Square on the Wayback Machine, when they are talking about, I read their annual report from last year, their 2022 or 2021
2022
annual report. They talk at length about diversity and how important it is. And in that discussion, that's where they announced they added Tope Luwani to the board. So they added him
a DEI
ostensibly because he is DEI. And that's effectively how they position it in the annual report.
Crazy.
Now attacking a black woman who's the head of Harvard for the same thing that you just did, but you can't possibly go out and say that guy's not qualified.
No, you can look at the other Pershing Square directors. He is just by words alone.
No,
by word count alone.
You also left out the fact that his biography on the Pershing Square is massive, and just below him on the Pershing Square website is another board member who basically ran like a restaurant, right?
Matt, I've been looking at director bios. It feels like my whole life. I don't think I've ever seen anyone with a BS in chemical engineering at MIT with a minor in economics and a JD from Harvard and an MBA from Harvard.
Yeah, I was just like for fun too. That's just for fun.
I mean, the only complaint you can have against him is that he stayed on one road in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He couldn't go beyond that.
That's enough to get him disqualified.
All right.
I feel like.
Third of all, a brief story about one of Bill's.
Third.
Yeah, I know. But I like all this stuff, so I just wanted to bash Bill a little bit more. A brief story about one of Bill's many failed proxy contests. Remember, it's okay to fail in Bill's world.
No, it's not.
I wanted to focus on Target. First of all, Matt, in an SEC filing, Bill said, I have always found it astonishing that in the most democratic nation in the world, elections for the boards of U.S. public companies are generally uncontested. In the political realm,
I agree with him.
We see analogous elections only in the third world and in dictatorships.
Okay. I don't disagree with him.
So despite that, he had 5 nominees to Target's board. One of them was himself. Okay, well, whatever.
Okay, all right, sure. A different dictator, but fine.
It's also funny, too, because another one was Starbucks' first boomerang CEO, Jim Donald, who only lasted 3 years at Starbucks. And despite the fact that Target's board had the former CEO at Wells Fargo, he had a guy named Richard Vague to take care of credit cards and credit at Target.
Do you know if Target's board at the time, Target's board, according to Freeflow Analytics, has one of the highest diversity power gaps, female power gaps, meaning
positive,
meaning that women in diverse cohorts actually have a tremendous amount of power on the Target board, which is interesting given like how Target is. Brian Cornell has said diversity drove growth over the last decade, more or less. Was the Target board equally as diverse when he did the proxy contest?
2009?
Yeah.
It's not. Most Fortune 500 companies were not as diverse as they are now. But yes, it was actually pretty diverse. And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't even going to mention it. Bill Ackman proposed 5 nominees to Target's board, all 5 white men.
Yeah,
despite the fact that does not reflect the board of Target at the time.
Well, I mean, but this is what the gaslight is, right? Like, if you just judge based on actions, is Target the Claudine Gay of Fortune 500 companies?
It's exactly why I focus on Target, Matt. Because to my next section, why Target? In July 2007, when Bill Ackman began buying the stock, the shares were trading in the 60s. They eventually peaked at $261. So
yeah,
despite the fact that he failed
money.
Target managed without him. Target was not a troubled company at the time. It was basically the only big box retailer that had figured out how to compete successfully against Walmart. Its 10-year stock performance is better than Walmart's. Analysts all loved it. Customers loved it, 80% of whom were women. So there was actually no reason for him
what are we doing?
To target Sorry to say that, but I had to say it.
I hate that.
So he said that he did not target because of his $1 billion investment that he wanted to get richer off. It's because he, quote, never wanted to see Target be referred to as a once great company.
Oh,
So there's some like weird
what is this?
patriotic. Okay, let me go on with Target, and I can wrap up here.
Do we have to?
So this is we're now at the annual meeting, and this is all from an article out of the New York Times in 2009. He quotes JFK at his speech at the annual meeting at Target. He says, "We will pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship." And at that point, he begins to cry, begins to tear up a little bit.
Ooh.
The performative Bill Ackman. He then immediately started echoing Martin Luther King Jr. by saying, I am not kidding you, I have a dream
Blah, blah, blah.
that directors will be elected on character and competence. I have a dream that one day the director nominating process will be transparent. I have a dream that our efforts here will be fruitful. I remind you of Martin Luther King's actual quote, Matt. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So he's referencing the character here.
He's doing the same thing. Yeah.
Doing the exact same thing. And then he chokes up again. And then after the meeting, I like this final quote from Bill Ackman. He was asked by the media if he planned to hold on to Target stock, something that he had vowed to do in the days leading up to the meeting, no matter what happened at the proxy contest. And he said, "We plan to continue owning the stock. We think this is a great company, but we reserve the right to change our minds if other opportunities arise." So that's Bill Ackman in a nutshell.
I actually
Quoting JFK, quoting Martin Luther King, crying at a Target annual meeting, full of bullshit, full of bluster.
I'm pretty sure that MLK meant he wished his children could get board seats.
And I also think what he meant was target a board that is well known to be diverse with 5 white male directors. I think it all works. And this is the guy who, 14 years later, is getting out his red pen and crossing out words like inclusion
and doxing Harvard students
Harvard students and
targeting female.
That's my Bill Ackman diatribe. I hope it's my last one, but I kind of perversely enjoy it. But I don't think enough people are going after this guy. I have no idea why they're not.
No,
but
look,
someone has to do it.
the all of this is the what rankles you about it is the level of gaslighting. It's whenever he says something is truth. Whenever he says when he attacks, Harvard for anti-Semitism and then defends Elon Musk for worse anti-Semitism. When he says plagiarism is horrible, Claudine Gay should be fired, and then his wife is found plagiarizing, but that's light plagiarism, and everybody does it. And now I'm going to find out that everyone does it. I'm going to prove it to you. Like it's like this. Also, the way they manipulate the mechanism of the internet, right? Which academics can't do, which is the fact that he is able to sneak in and edit his website, and it only took us like searching around for an hour to find the original text, but that's not how academics operate. Everything is published, everything is out there to be scrutinized. He is able to kind of change his intent, change his language, and just because he feels like, because he's angry. You have to guess that this is part of the reason why Tracy, what's her name, Palagian, who is a board member on Harvard, also was a board member at Pershing Square. She resigned in December. Around the same time, they changed all that language about DEI. She works in social impact. That's her life's work is in social impact, and she's now finds herself sitting on a board with a man who's attacking a black female president at the university where she sits as a board member. She's a board member about DEI, about the fact that DEI is the root cause, quote, of anti-Semitism at Harvard. And let's not forget where my long story started with the fact that he incorporated in the bailiwick of Guernsey, which is a tax haven. So he has no interest in giving back to anything. That's not DEI. There's no DEI there. That's why he did it. Yeah, there's no nothing there. All right, let's do some real news. Yes, thank you. You gotta be exhausted. I am, but I'm kind of fired up and exhausted. All right, this is a throwback. What is this? This is a throwback because right now we're going to talk about Boeing. Oh, what happened at Boeing? All right, so the short story is the door of an airplane while flying the airplane came off the airplane.
Yes.
Okay. Apparently they found that the door plugs that hold the door shut were not properly installed or tightened or fastened or something like that.
And you told me on Monday's show, did you, that they were warned about this? They were told not to fly over.
There was a
bodies of
warning
water?
light about pressurization problems that kept going on, and they warned the plane to fly over land instead of water because they didn't know if the warning light was real or if it was defective or something like that.
Okay.
But they grounded a massive number of, I think 8% of United's flights have been grounded. There's some massive number. Delays everywhere. It's a nightmare. While they inspect the planes, they found several. One of the last reports I read was that several other planes were found to have the same loose door plugs.
Loose door plugs.
Loose door plugs. So there's something like a Gus in Tacoma is just not cranking the fucking thing tight enough.
As long as it's not Claudine Gay in Cambridge.
Well, I'm sure it's a diversity problem, but Ackman's not involved yet. But I wanted to bring this up in a very different way, which is to say, here's a hypothetical. If everyone on the board happens to be your friend and business partner, and are they more likely to worry about the next martini they have together or a door plug for an airplane?
I think it's a lot like us here in the office. We're constantly talking about, like, what are we serving our children for dinner later? How are we going to do lunch?
That's right.
It's a lot of.
We haven't mentioned door plugs at all today.
A lot of chit-chat nonsense.
Not one mention of door plugs. Well, here's your current board. Robert Bradway, 8% influence. Dave Calhoun is the CEO of Boeing, 22% influence. Lynn Good, 10% influence. Larry Kellner, 12% influence. Steve Mollenkopf, 10% influence. It's a pretty big board. Ronald Williams, 14% influence. He's the second highest.
And a lot of these directors are recently hired from the previous scandal.
All right, let's get there. It's what they are is definitively mediocre. Right?
Okay.
They don't produce a lot of anything. In fact, the top director for earnings bats 850.59. That's Robert Bradway. The top for TSR bats 500. Right, like, so that's the average director bats 500.
And
globally.
refresh my knowledge about this board. When the previous scandal hit because two airlines crashing, killing
hundreds
close
of people,
to 400 people, board members did resign, but shareholders didn't actually vote out anybody, right?
There were no votes out.
So my point being that despite that, it still was a protected class of overseers, right? There was, right? Am I wrong?
Well, so yes, 100%. And here's how it gets to be. All right,
it was left up to Boeing to decide
to pick the new board.
Ones, right?
They picked all the new board members themselves.
To Bill Ackman's point, his only good point was that these are not even contested elections. Boeing suggests someone, and investors just get the green rubber stamp out.
So what the history of the Boeing board we've done in this show many times. I'm not going to go over the entire history right now. I'm going to basically tell you a name, Ken Duberstein.
Right.
In fact, if you're watching the live stream, this man behind me, that is Ken Duberstein.
Yeah, that's our company.
He's the
right
patron saint of our company, of Free Float.
The connected patron
Ken
saint.
Duberstein leaves the Reagan administration, starts Duberstein Group, which is a lobbying organization. Their biggest client every year is the Business Roundtable from 1999 and in perpetuity. Duberstein died 2 or 3 years ago now. But on the Boeing board was basically everyone from the Business Roundtable, all the CEOs from the Business Roundtable, including their future CEO, Dave Calhoun, their other future CEO, Dennis Muhlenberg. All these people knew each other. And I can go through a list, a 20-year list of the Boeing board, and describe how they all knew each other within 2 degrees.
I got to say that's one of the oddest remedies that Boeing did was they hired from their own board.
Yes.
They took a guy who was steeped in this
Dave Calhoun
Martini
becomes
cesspool.
the CEO because he's on the Boeing board from years and years ago.
At a moment where it would seem obvious that you get an external hire to kind of revamp the culture.
You get anybody else. But here's
from
the thing.
outside, right?
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
We can link Boeing board members to regulators. In fact, Elaine Chao, who was the ex-U.S. Secretary of Transportation, who was overseeing Boeing for the MAX 8.
wife of McConnell,
McConnell's wife. She was on
Mitch
the Wells
McConnell.
Fargo board for years with the ex-CEO of General Mills, who was a Duberstein client. Duberstein actually was on the board with John Bryson, who left the board to become the Secretary of Commerce. So there are so many connections. It's absurd. In fact,
it's a great place to either continue your career, to foster your career, to make new networking contacts. It's maybe not a great place to oversee the safety of jet airlines, but it's a great place to get to know each other.
Who's overseeing jet airlines? I will say this: if you're watching the live stream on my other shoulder here, this is a network map of the board members up to 2010, the board that made the decision to clear the MAX 8 plane. And I'm moving around the network map on here, but you can see these are people that are connected. All of them are connected to one another. Then the MAX 8 planes fall out of the sky. And this gets to your question of refreshment. We bring in a new group of people, right? Except that the new group of people, Akhil Johri, he's ex-UTC. He worked with Greg Hayes for years and years. And Greg Hayes is on the Business Roundtable, a Duberstein client. So Duberstein knew Akhil Johri already. He also knew Ellen Kullman, who's a UTC board member, who's on Amgen's board with Robert Bradway, still on the board today. Steve Mollenkampf, he worked at Blackstone. He was he has a board member from Blackstone who worked with two other board members from Boeing.
So keeping it incestuous.
I can go through to this year. Sabrina Susan, Suez CEO, their first ever international board member. And they do that, I think, for national security reasons. They're worried about, giving some foreign agent access to, sensitive information. And it took me 20 minutes to figure this out. She sits on the board of ITT Inc. with a man named Nick Fernandakis, who's a director at Duke Energy with Lynn Good, who's on the Boeing board. I mean, it's literally
and again,
everyone.
And again, shareholders have nothing negative to say about this, I presume.
The last proxy, April 2023, the worst vote on the last proxy. 91% for Ronald Williams.
Which is not a
That was
bad
the
vote.
worst. The top three tied at 96%. MSCI's governance score, 6.7 out of 10. 76th percentile globally. They're in the top 25% globally for governance. Sustainalytics in their quote-unquote risk ratings, I don't even know what they mean, but they said medium risk, and they had strong governance management. They had a strong board structure and average management quality.
It's what most other ESG data providers, research companies are not able to unearth is this type of network.
I'm just saying, literally no one cares. It's not like...
Well, do they not care, or do they not, shameless plug here, do they not have access to what we're trying to look at?
Well, even when we show them, they're not sure what to do with it half the time. All I'm saying is that the board could have approved airplane doors that were secured with butt plugs instead of door plugs, and investors would still elect the directors at a 90% plus rate.
That's true.
That is, if you want to know what's going on at Boeing, if you're like confused, like how does this keep happening at Boeing? We've had multiple crashes. They can't seem to secure a door. There's all sorts of problems. Like, how does this keep happening? The CEO knows everyone on the board for decades.
Look,
they all 100% know each other. There are no checks. There are no balances.
Boeing might be the perfect example of why I rant and rave about that CEOs should absolutely not serve on their board of directors. There's absolutely no need. And Calhoun might be the prime example of this, right? Because not only did he use his relationships on the board to become CEO, but then he just adds cronies and friends to
that to me is the worst part. Like the expectation would be, what is the function of the board? The function of the board
oversight
is to provide oversight.
End of story.
It is to represent an investor and keep management accountable. But if the board is either A, all management, or and they have all the power, or B, all friends, what is the accountability?
Or, as you point out constantly, the amount of money they're making is enough for them to shut up in the first place.
And that is the last thing that I pulled on this. Larry Kellner, who's the chair of the board, the lead independent director, who's been there for 12 years. He's very leady, right?
And it's worth pointing out that in jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, for instance, you can't even call yourself independent if you've been on the board for more than a decade.
Which is
no longer
they're 100%
independent.
right about.
Yeah.
And Larry Kellner has consistently gotten like relatively to everybody else bad votes from investors.
Okay.
Never voted out, but consistently bad votes. He was the CEO of Continental Airlines. In case you need a refresher, that was the airline that failed miserably and went into bankruptcy.
Oh, okay.
Got bought
I was
by
going to say,
United.
I haven't heard about them in a while.
Yeah, because they got bought by United.
Right.
In fact, he has connections to all these board members as well. Larry Kellner last year reported in the proxy made $600,000 to be a board member.
How so high?
Because he's the chair of the board.
Okay.
And they gave him a massive retainer. And it's inconceivable that somebody who shows up for 12 meetings a year, who's mediocre at their job, can get $600,000 a year for it. And the constant okay from investors. In fact, Larry Kellner's career on boards, he's in multiple board positions, career on boards, 333 earnings, 323 TSR. The average directors are 400 to 600. That is just pure average.
Yeah.
He is a below average director who's making twice as much as the next board member on a board where fucking shit keeps falling off the planes.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
So this is my plea.
Oh.
Somebody, and I'm gonna play us out on this
Yeah.
plea.
I feel like I should take off my top hat for this.
Somebody, please buy free flow analytics data, look at the Boeing board, and vote against every single one of them.
It's not going to be Boeing. It's going to be.
You can, if you can't do it with this
what's
company.
the point of your existence if it's not
Honestly,
this? Yeah.
we already proved you couldn't do it with Norfolk Southern, and nobody directly like lit on fire from that, right?
Don't you want to have some pride when you go home to your husband or your wife or your
partner,
roommate,
your dog, your cat, your hamster,
that you actually made a decision?
I went
based
to
on
work
knowledge?
today and I changed something. I changed a thing.
Yeah.
I actually did a thing. That's all we got. That's Hazelnut Rollis. I am your analyst, Matt Mascardi. We are Free Float. Come back tomorrow. We've got a proxy countdown.
Oh my God.
We're doing Becton Dixon, right?
Yeah, Becton
Dickinson. That'll be fun for somebody. And on Friday, we've got our weekly wrap up. Until then, goodbye.